Good morning and welcome to KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning. Our great friend, Congressman Russ Fulcher, joining us. Good to have you with us.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on. And I always feel just a little bit awkward with that title. Maybe I'll get used to that, but still feel a little awkward with that.
Really?
Russ always works pretty good, but...
Even in Washington, when you're hobnobbing with Bret Baier and all these people from Fox, as you can tell, I've been monitoring your social media.
Hey, nothing compares to spending time with Kevin Miller, okay? I mean, Bret Baier and his buddies can take a back seat when Miller's around.
Well, I appreciate that. So if you could, share with us a little of what's been going on since you were elected, since the general election night.
Sure. Yeah, we've gone through the orientation program, or at least most of it. There's a couple-week program for the new members, and so I've attended that. And large class, Kevin. We've got over 100 new members coming in. There's around plus minus 30 Republicans and about 70, a little over Democrats. So large class. The orientation was, for the most part, split. The Republicans went through a program separate from the Democrats. My understanding is it's pretty much the same thing, but it was segregated, which, honestly, I think it probably would have been better to integrate that, just from a relationship standpoint. But it wasn't. And so we've gone through that. What we don't know is committee assignments. The process for that's changed a little bit now that the Democrats are in the majority, so I've had an opportunity to list five of them, and then try to make my case with the powers that be as much as I can to see what we get placed on. But for the most part, that's still way up in the air. So we had office selection is another thing. We got a great office. That's a lottery process. So that's
how does that work for people that have lives, that are working, that are not following you on every social media outlet known to man, like I do on KIDO Talk Radio? You have a lottery for your office? How does that work?
That's true, yeah. So if you're a sitting member, you have the option of keeping the office you have and just doing nothing, or you can literally put your name in a hat. And then based on tenure, then you draw your number, and then you can select with whatever is available. And we got very blessed on that front. I drew a low number, and we actually got one of our top 5 picks. It's a very nice office with a large square footage footprint. It's in the Longworth House office building, if people are familiar with that, and that's the most likely location where the committees I would be in, where they'd be centered. So it's the right building, it's the right floor. It's we got very, very fortunate with our office process.
So what was it like for you getting elected? You and your daughter Megan going up and participating. You know, we see most political people as objects and not as people. You've always been very relatable to the folks in Idaho, obviously, because of your connections, your family's long ties to the area. But, again, you're sitting in there in committees, and you're going to be a congressman. Russ Fulcher, the person, what was going on in your mind? You've got your daughter there. What a great lesson, not only in family, but in civics.
Sure, she was very involved with the campaign. She did a great job, and frankly, she was the right person to participate with me in that process. It's an honor. It is humbling, but frankly, my mind kept returning to those who helped put me there. Honestly, in fact, to the point where we're going to go through the rest of the process. We're going to go through the swearing in. We're going to be there, assuming the government's not shut down. But we'll be there on the 3rd of January, which is the day that members of Congress are sworn in. We'll be in the chamber. We'll do the ceremony. But I'm going to do something a little bit different after that. When my colleagues get on a bus and go to Williamsburg, which is what the current plan is, to finish the orientation, I'm going to get on an airplane and I'm coming home, and we're going to do a small little swearing-in ceremony right here. And the reason I wanted to do that is I look at this as a promise. And I'm making a promise for the first time in federal office. And there's nothing against giving that promise to Nancy Pelosi, which is where the oath is to initially be administered. But I think it's more appropriate for me to give that promise to the people of Idaho. So we're going to do a small event here, and we're going to do that process in Boise. And I that's just one of those other tools that I'm going to try to use to just continually remind myself where the loyalty belongs, and that's Idaho, not D.C.
Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. What was the mood like with this large or the largest freshman class when you're all coming from these eclectic different backgrounds of experience, age, gender, ethnicity? What was that like?
A couple of things came to mind. Well, first of all, at least on the Republican side, because that's where most of my interaction has been, I think it's generally a good group of people, a well-meaning group of people. For the most part, the new members are coming in for the right reasons. They want to make a difference. Most have been involved with government before, either at the state level or through some effort in a previous business life. They've had involvement. So there's very few that are just showing up in a legislative role for the first time. There were a couple things, though, Kevin. One is when I was doing my human resource sign-in process, if you will, just the administrative process of becoming a federal employee, which sounds kind of strange, but nevertheless, going through that process, one of the things that came out was a very large percentage of the not just new but existing members of Congress do not have passports. And that was a bit surprising to me in the environment that we live in today, in the global economy we have, and frankly just the complexity of the culture and the nature of our homeland security. It was a bit surprising to hear that, and so that was one thing that stood out. The other thing that stood out was the security needs. I've been to Washington, D.C. quite a bit, and it's way different now, and it's changed, I would say, in the last couple of years pretty significantly. There are now 2,300 Capitol Police, 2,300, and all of the major arteries to the House office buildings, Senate office buildings, the Capitol, they've been closed off. Unless you have a pass, you can't drive to it. For the most part, you have to walk, and we were traveling as a group, obviously, but we always had police escort front and rear. And and it's just something humbling. I was on the steps of the Capitol. We were taking the freshman class picture, and you may recall this. I had to call into the Kevin Miller Show, and I had the phone to my ear because they were organizing this. And they actually snapped the first picture with the phone to my ear, talking to you. And of course, I got yelled at, and we took another one. But if you, I don't know, I'm sure the picture won't show this, but on either side of us were security officers with fully automatic weapons. And there's just something about that just doesn't set well, to see the U.S. Capitol ringed with officers carrying fully automatic weapons. So, those were I suppose, maybe the surprises. But on a more positive note, it's a huge infusion of new blood, and it's my hope that with a few appropriate people taking leadership roles and with perhaps God's grace, that we can infuse an attitude, a different attitude that's not quite so polarizing.
Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us. Kevin Miller here on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So, going through the personal experience here, you've lived in Idaho, you have a home. When's the last time you were looking for an apartment? I mean, that must have, we always hear about this separate world in D.C. where, space is at a premium and it's almost like you're going back to college looking for your first place, or how was that?
That's right. And unlike even at the Boise Capitol, where we have members of the legislature coming in from around the state, there's a couple of focal points, one for House, one for Senate, where there's assistance to help identify where people might stay for that 3-month plus minus window of time during the Idaho legislature. There is no such thing in Washington, D.C., and there's not a stipend for it either, by the way. But so you're on your own. And so I networked. I actually found a realtor that helped me.
That would help with your background, I suppose.
It did. And so we did a several-day search. I am the proud tenant, well, not so proud maybe, but the tenant, or soon-to-be tenant, of a 500-square-foot studio apartment 8 blocks from the Capitol for a steal of a price of $2,500 a month. So...
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
It's a 500-foot studio apartment 8 blocks from the Capitol for $2,500 a month. And
how's the view?
Frankly, the view is not great. I stare at a busy street and another building out the window, and so it's not great at all. But frankly, I was happy to get it. Yeah, and I the exercise program is walking, and so we'll be doing a lot of walking. But that's another thing too. On that, back to that memory of doing my signing in for the administrative portion of becoming a federal employee. The person that was helping me said, "Will you be living here?" And I thought she meant in Washington, D.C., and I said, I will have a place here, yes. And she says, no, I mean, will you be living here, like in the building here? And I said, no. She says, well, more than 100 of your colleagues will be. In other words, between House and Senate, there's more than 100 members of the United States Congress and the United States Senate that physically live in their office. And part of that, Kevin, is just for the reason I just mentioned. There's many people, even in those ranks, cannot afford $2,500 a month, and there are some that just choose to for other reasons. But that's why you see cots folded up in members' offices is for that reason.
Much more coming up with Congressman Russ Fulcher. We are going to talk about his expectations, the Democrats controlling the committees and the House, of course, also Idaho's influence, and President Trump. We've got a lot going on this morning. Thank you for starting your day with us, waking up on the right side, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. And once again, our great friend, Congressman Russ Fulcher, joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. I go back to this. Now, you've got, would you say that your office is exceptional in Washington? Usually we hear first freshmen, they're very small, they're very tiny, they're very cramped. So if people are living in their offices, it's not like the corner office somewhere. It's pretty small, right?
Yes, and first of all, the office that I drew in the lottery is exceptional. It's there's different floors and different amounts of square feet. It's the largest square footage footprint in that House office building. And so just the physical space. Now, that said, it's in 3 rooms. So my actual personal office space where my desk will be and that type of thing is probably no different than any other. But it's the overall space of the suite, if you will. So for legislative staff and that type of thing. So it's bigger than most on that front, and it's positioned well. So, it rarely happens with freshmen. We were just very fortunate, and so I'm thankful for that.
Let's move on to the business of the day. Obviously, people are very concerned about where their money is being spent. That's why you're elected to represent the folks of the 1st Congressional District. By the way, have you gotten used to that? The 1st Congressional District?
I'm working at it. When I hear you say that, that's another one of those reminders. I got to get used to it. But yes, yeah.
So when we take a look at the attitude in Washington, and obviously you're just getting started, but how do you see this playing out? Our friend Sean Hannity says it's going to be nonstop for the next 2 years.
The reality is, most likely the new class and the new 116th Congress is going to be confronted with issues like border wall and impeachment hearings, or at least a move towards impeachment, which is to me is a sad commentary on the state of the situation. But there really does not appear to be a firm agenda by the new majority coming in. It's not a criticism; it's just an observation. I mean, to the extent we try to dig in to see what that agenda is, it's impeachment, and it's dealing with the president's demand for border wall. And so I would like to say it's something different, and I would like to say it's more positive. But immediately I start thinking about, okay, so given that environment, what do I do? What's the best thing I can do? And I come around to a couple of things, Kevin. As a freshman coming into the minority party, I am not likely to be carrying a huge stick, okay? It's just the reality of it. I mean, I doubt if Speaker Pelosi is going to be seeking my counsel on a weekly basis, all right?
Right.
So what do I do? And it's pretty clear. I put together the best constituent service team, the best staffing that I possibly can. And because we still will have 3 offices in Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, and Meridian. And we become the best resource for people in Idaho that need help working through federal channels, and so that's probably the best thing I can do. The second thing I need to do is I need to memorize the United States Congress rule book, because if you know the rules, if you know the procedures, if you know how to maneuver legislatively, if you know how to maneuver through the leadership channels, if you know how to maneuver the process, then you do have the ability potentially to slip in an amendment here, or to perhaps put up a roadblock there, or open up the channel in a different place. I learned that in the Idaho State Senate, is if you become a master of the rules, you can accomplish much more than you could otherwise. And so those are going to be my primary efforts, that plus just trying to build some general rapport, convince members both in my own party and the other that hopefully I'm someone they can communicate with, that there's at least enough competence to study the issues before engaging, and try to get some credibility that way.
Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. And we continue on with Congressman Fulcher. You know, the House chamber, for those of us that haven't been in it, seems pretty small. Have you had a chance to walk the chamber at all yet?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have. And there's a lot of history there. If memory serves, the current chamber was put in place right at the tail end of the Civil War, and right in that era. And so it's not changed a lot. When on the rare occasion, like for the State of the Union and whatnot, there are seats, if you will, for enough for both the House and the Senate to gather there, and that's where it takes place. But it's very snug, and but it is historic, and it's one of those things that you kind of mentioned that I reflect on as a function of your comments a few minutes ago about just, you walk in and you look around and you take into context who was there before and some of the things that has happened there before, and it is one of those sobering things. And if you're an American and you've got patriotism in your blood, you can't help but be moved. You can't help but have the hair stand up on the back of your neck just a little bit when you walk in there, especially knowing that you're going to be representing your people in your district there.
What some people may not understand is the security to get into that chamber, just as in the gallery, is no cell phone. They wand you. So it's really old school, where you have people watching the House make the so-called sausage, if you will.
That's true. And compare and contrast that to Boise, Idaho, where there is not a metal detector, there's not armed security, and there's one of those reminders of, isn't it great to be from Idaho?
It is.
And so you're right. And the security is only going to be tighter moving forward.
You've had a chance to get to know people that most of us maybe will hear on the radio, maybe we'll see on television. Congressman Jordan, you brought into our studios here at KIDO Talk Radio. What's that been like to hang out with these major heavy hitters?
For whatever reason, and I really don't know why. I might have a couple theories, but for whatever reason, I'm the only new member that I know of that's been given the opportunity to interact on a personal level with both the president and the vice president. And that's a channel that obviously is advantageous to any member. And the fact that they took note, or the fact that they gave mindshare to a rookie coming in from the state of Idaho, is something that I'm pleased with, and I won't abuse that channel. I do, at least at this point, have an open channel to both. And we might be going in the minority, but when I say we, I'm talking about the Republican effort, because I'm a Republican. We also have the executive branch, and that executive branch is under fire, but there's a tremendous amount of potential influence if you can leverage those two things. So, but you know what? The president and the vice president, they're people just like you and me. The other major players, the majority party, minority party, they're people just like you and me.
Well, I've got to follow up on that about the president and the vice president. Can you hang on?
Sure.
More coming up with Congressman Russ Fulcher here on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Kevin Miller with you. Let's find out what's happening in your world. Good morning, Maggie. And welcome back, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Congressman Russ Fulcher with us. Now, look, this is breaking news here when you're talking about your interactions with the president and the vice president.
I haven't said anything about it to anybody.
Well, thank you for that. We appreciate it. What was that like? I don't mean to be a fanboy, but can you say?
Sure. I believe the president and vice president are looking to try to have keep a pulse on perhaps the attitudes and mindsets and motive, if you will, of some of the new people coming in, and they utilize one channel or another to try to identify folks to help relay what that pulse is like, and I may be one of them. And so I took the opportunity, and I believe we'll have more of those opportunities. But it just underscored what you and I were talking about a few minutes ago. Yes, they're in incredibly important roles, but they're just people,
right?
And they have backgrounds. They have they're a product of their own personal experience, just like you and I are. And in that kind of a setting, make no attempt to be intimidating, no attempt to put on a facade.
Sure.
And frankly, we just had a conversation like I am with you right now. There was no strict agenda, and frankly, there wasn't a lot of time. But it was nice just to get that validation that these are just folks trying to do a job, and their jobs are very, very complex. And so it also helps me to get to peek under the hood a little bit. And if you're going to be working with someone, if you can peek under the hood and start to get an understanding of what makes them tick, it just puts you in a better position to interact and hopefully do things in conjunction with them.
So was this on the phone or in person?
No, in person.
Okay, so now back to the fanboy thing here at KIDO Talk Radio. You get the call, the president would like to see you. What goes on in your mind, and can you describe where you had the conversation with he and the vice president?
Sure. So they were two separate meetings, and the it wasn't quite that dramatic. The political director had reached out to me for the president and asked if I could have a meeting, and I was there. Obviously, I wasn't going to say no.
Sure,
but I went in with the anticipation of seeing the political director, and I did. And so, and frankly, a lot of that discussion was about the campaign and about the dynamic that I went through, and
they were concerned about what was going on in Idaho.
And they knew an astounding amount of detail of what transpired in Idaho, not just with the congressional and the Senate side, but on the governor's side as well. And then what that led to was an invitation that same evening to attend with a group of sitting members that were supporting the president in this case, to attend a taping of a commercial that the president wanted to do. And so that was the setup, if you will. And it was a relatively small group, and as far as I know, I was the only new member that was invited to do that. And so that was a setup, and it was not at the White House. It was actually at the Trump Hotel. And
it's very nice, by the way.
This is very nice.
Yeah.
And it was, after going through 92 stages of security and that type of thing. So that was a setting, and it was brief but meaningful. And with the vice president, I suspect it had to do with my orientation seatmate, who is Greg Pence from Indiana. He's an incoming representative from Indiana, and the vice president's older brother. And so Indiana, Idaho, we were pretty much together for a couple of weeks, and he set up an evening with the vice president at his house, at his house, his residence. And so we had it was actually much more time to interact with the vice president in that setting. And so again, those are opportunities that you.
So that was at the Naval Observatory?
Correct.
Now,
Correct.
Again, very few people have been in there that haven't been the vice president. Your background in real estate, I mean, what were you thinking of the location and the history there?
It's to be honest, it's probably a significant percentage of the Kevin Miller listening audience has a much nicer home, if you want to true. It's in a fabulous location, of course, and it's historic and it's very nice, but it's still, a 100-plus-year-old home. And it's been remodeled, and it's of course the decor was very historic and whatnot. But for all practical purposes, it's a humble place, at least the living quarters. And it was in the evening, so I didn't get a chance to go around the outside or anything and get a good view there. Plus, it's pretty much blocked off.
Right.
But the vice president, same thing. Very personal, very personable, and an open discussion to pretty much just about anything. The president, not surprisingly, had more of a tendency to discuss the business and the issue type stuff.
Sure.
The vice president was. Of course, we had more time, but he was more into what's your personal background and that type of thing. So again, I think that was probably a function of his brother and that connection.
Right.
Why that transpired.
And while you're living in the moment, as they call it, in the moment, are you thinking about the people of Idaho?
Yes, and the reason why is I can't tell you, Kevin, the number of times. On the campaign trail, a statement something like, "Don't drink the water," will be said to me over and over. Don't let the swamp get to you. Don't, quote, become one of them. Those types of comment over and over and over. So it's fresh on my mind. And I guess, frankly, maybe going in with just a little bit of, my head on a swivel,
Sure.
Wanting to make sure that I know who's coming and going, who's got my back, who's on my front. It's just, and so the antenna is up, if you will, and so I am thinking about that type of thing, and there's been other influences. There has been efforts by some to provide advantageous rent rates, for example, on an apartment. If you drill down on that, it happens to be someone who's got a very special interest in a lobby corps or something, who's trying to offer a favor. Well, those are the things that you got to just watch your back on, and you can get in trouble so quick. And it's tempting, to take perhaps a real advantageous price on an apartment. But when you check who the owner is and what maybe their ulterior motive could be, it's just one of those gotchas. And so just trying to be mindful, trying to keep in mind who put me there.
Right.
I often ask people from the state of Idaho, consider sometime in the next couple of years paying a visit. I think there's an accountability tool there. Plus, it reminds me who I'm serving. And I need that. I know I need that.
Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. We've got about a minute left in this segment. And I'm just trying to, you've got a couple people that have been with you for quite a long time that I believe are joining the team. So it's not like you're going alone.
No. And we're going to make a formal announcement in the next few days of who the entire team, or at least we haven't filled all the slots, but
right.
At least a lot of the major components are going to be. But the Washington, D.C. office is going to be Idaho-centric, and some have counseled me against that, saying, oh, you need a lot of Capitol Hill people, and we will have some. But the names that will appear on our roster, if you will, are going to be pretty well known in the state of Idaho, and that's on purpose. I want that Idaho influence driving it. That said, we did confirm the hiring of 2 Capitol Hill veterans with Idaho ties. And I'll just mention a couple. The 2 primarily, Kevin, people won't know here so much, but Andrew Neal will be our legislative director. He's from Washington State, was with Kathy McMorris Rogers for 4 years. He's also the brother of the individual doing similar job for Congressman Simpson. So there's a good connection there, and Capitol Hill experience. The communications person, at least in D.C., will be Alexa Rogi, who was doing that job for Congressman Blum before he lost his race. So we're going to have some seasoned people there to help navigate the Hill. But other than that, the core is going to be Idaho-centric people.
More coming up with our great friend, Congressman Fulcher. Just hearing about, he used to hang out with me and Tea Party Bob, now the president and the vice president. Just kidding.
I'll tell you what, it was a shift down, buddy.
All right. More coming up next on 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Our final segment with Congressman Russ Fulcher as he gets ready to run the government here. I was going to say from the Treasure Valley, but back to some of the big issues that obviously it's going to be very different now that the Democrats are involved. You've worked with in your past business life some high-profile personalities, and I still can't get any Steve Jobs stories out of you, but you know what it's like to work with folks that have the big stick. Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, a lot of these folks. It's going to be a powder keg.
It will, and I think this is where your diplomatic skills are going to be tested. And I anticipate that, but again, they're still human beings. I'm probably more concerned about the groupthink mindset as opposed to the individual. If you can get your way into having a discussion with an individual, you can make headway there. You've got a chance to communicate, make a connection. Gain some credibility, but when there's this groupthink attitude, or people who have a tendency to move in herds, for lack of a better analogy, that's harder because their minds are often made up before you even have the conversation, and so we're just gonna see what kind of progress we can make. I feel very good, Kevin, in the in Idaho's situation there. Senator Risch, Senator Crapo, Congressman Simpson have all been very helpful for me. We communicate regularly already at my request because I need it. They may not, but I do. But the intent is to try to leverage as much influence as we can for Idaho as possible. And I can tell you there will be very much a concerted effort to try to leverage Idaho's influence as much as possible. We're going to have disagreements, no question about it. But when we do, we're going to know about it. It's not going to be personal, and we will have communicated that ahead of time.
Congressman Fulcher with us, Kevin Miller, traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Congressman Fulcher with us. Getting back to you. You know, this is a journey that began, maybe 6 years ago when you gave up a Senate seat, a position of leadership, taking on Governor Otter, incredibly giving him a tough race, probably the toughest, if not the toughest, one of the toughest he's ever had. Coming back, we had a chance to talk to Dr. Ahlquist, very complimentary of you when you were running for governor. Now you're a congressman. Can you take us through what it took to make that happen? Everybody goes, wow, you met the president, but we're not talking about the miles on the Fulcher pickup truck or all the personal sacrifice that you and your family have been through.
I think it was one of the famous college football coaches, Lou Saban or Lou Holtz or one of those guys, made a statement that said, a lot of people have the will to win, but do you have the will to prepare to win? And that's kind of how campaigns are. I think there's a lot of people who could do a really good job, but can you get there? And the getting there is the time in the weight room before you go on the field. It's the time in the exercise procedures that make you fit enough to compete, and that's a campaign. And frankly, for me, Kevin, as I reflect back on it, it was 14 that probably won this race. It wasn't necessarily 18. And when I say that, it's what you reflected. It was the governor's race that in 2014, and that was where our initial network was built. That's where the alliances, many of them, were made. And honestly, when we did come up a little bit short, not a lot, but we came up a little bit short, and I was okay with that. I did what I felt was best, and it was nothing personal. It wasn't negative. It was just, it was a political campaign. But the groundwork that was laid there didn't go away, and I thought I was done. And that was okay. We got our business going, and well, when the situation rolled around again, and I realized that the network was very much still in play, and there's more to it than this, obviously, but bottom line was I had a strong belief that if we got in the congressional race, we were highly likely to win it. And even in 14, I prevailed in the governor's race in the 1st district. It was the overall state that I came up a little bit short. So we had a good network, and basically we just blew life back into it and logged another 35,000 on the Fulcher Mobile, and here we are. But it also, oh man, it's hard, but there are rewards that come with it. I know people, I know stories, I know personalities all over the state. I know situations that people are struggling with. I've had the welder from Nampa come up in tears telling me that he couldn't make his health care payment. I've had the potato farmer come up to me just shaking because of the obstacles put in front of him by federal regulations and hindering his harvest. The list goes on and on and on. And I wouldn't have had those experiences if it wasn't for this. So It's a blessing, and we live in a republic, and that's people don't realize, but as frightening as it sounds, when I stand up and I say something, or when I cast a vote, I am that person. I am the first district, and I take that very, very seriously. And in fact, I think I'm Kevin Miller, because I think you're in the first district.
You are. I am in the first district.
And so, you know what? That just resonates with me. And my biggest fear doesn't have anything to do with corruption or the swamp or the process or the people I'm interacting with. My biggest fear is doing something wrong because I didn't know that there was facts that I didn't learn or hadn't been revealed to me, or I didn't research well enough. That's what bothers me the most. If I got the facts and have to make a decision, I'm okay with that, and I'll defend it, and I'll live with it. And some might be happy, some might be sad, but it's where I make a call and then find out that there was more to the story. That's what bothers me, or that's what I'm most fearful about.
Congressman Fulcher, we've got about 20 seconds. Anything else you'd like to say to people here?
Committees. We have an opportunity to put in for various committees, and I tried to choose ones, or at least put in for ones that have the biggest impact on Idaho, and I don't know what they're going to be. But we had the option of listing 5. The ones that I chose were resources, judiciary, agriculture, energy and commerce, and transportation, because all of those are very, very centric and impactful on Idaho. I'm lobbying for whatever I can get, but I don't know where it's going to go, Kevin. We won't know till after we swear in.
Congressman Fulcher, we appreciate you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kevin.